Good evening, Eden community. It is Thursday, the 27th of January, and we have our scheduled webinar this evening with Mr. Andre Stănescu and Dr. Adela Fofiu. And as every one of you who were here with us last week or watching in our communities, you know that tonight's webinar is about the social circumplex. So we have two of the applications developers on with us tonight to speak in depth and to answer questions per our webinar structure here. At this point, we're going to hand over to Mr. Andre Stănescu. Most of you know Andre by now as a loyal compatriot and one of the brainchilds behind Eden. So Andre, give it a whack, buddy.
Thank you, Chris. And hello, everyone. It's really good to be back on the show. Thank you again for the invitation. It's been honestly quite an interesting landscape on the stock exchange since our last webinar. And honestly, for Eden and Prisma Analytics, it was just amazing to see how Decision Point behaves in such a harsh environment. Of course, due to high volatility in the market. I'm sure you all guys saw this in the past week. I mean, the results of testing Decision Point have been very, very convincing, confirming that all the hard work has eventually paid off. And of course, I know everyone is looking forward to using the application. I saw it in the comments, I saw it in the community and so on. But here is the promise, the wait will be worth it. So yeah, the subject for today is Decision Point, and we will also discuss about the social circumplex towards the end. But first of all, I'd like to invite you to do like a short recap of last week. So long story short, we have discussed about what does Decision Point help you with. And I've mentioned some really critical aspects, such as, for me, it's a tool to do fast analysis of public and private information sources over a selected period of time, regardless of the quantity of information. Remember, I told you that Decision Point integrates about 130,000 news per day, both from open and closed sources. Of course, it's not humanly possible to read and interpret all of them during the day. And that's why the tool does this whole interpretation and analysis for you. For me, it's a tool that integrates and displays all analyzed data through a mechanism that detects emotions and sentiments. But about this, we'll go on later. Again, for me, it is a tool that excludes any kind of subjective data analysis interpretation, making it basically impossible for results to be altered. And last but not least, it's a tool that displays indicators that influence the company and that are influenced or constructed, again, from emotions or primary sentiments. I've also mentioned last week about the target markets that Decision Point is addressing. Remember that I've told you about banks, trading companies, investment groups, consulting companies, which are all in the B2B segment. Also, I've mentioned traders, quants, risk managers, or even people in the management and quality departments, which for us are in the B2C segment. I also gave you some examples on how people in the specific target market can use Decision Point. And I think the examples were quite beautiful. And lastly, we have discussed about the basic dashboard. And I helped you to better understand the indicators that are being present there. So this time around, I'll begin the webinar with, of course, another demo of Decision Point. Today, I'd like to discuss about the advanced features and the specific indicators that you can find there. You're already familiar with the interface. So my proposal would be just to jump right into the demo. Due to a lack of time, I will discuss about the indicators that have not been mentioned last week. So if you're curious about more details on the basic indicators, I would suggest to just take a look at the last webinar. So if you just give me 1 second, I will go ahead and share my screen. It should be visible now. Hopefully you can see it. I guess it's all good. So I just jumped right into it. You can see the advanced tab, which is at the moment here opened. And yeah, let's just go through the indicators and have a short discussion about what we have here. So, and the first mini dashboard, which you can see on the left-hand side, you can see the sector. Of course, you can see the name of the company. You can see the founding year, country of origin, current CEO, and of course, website. First thing first, you can see the momentum indicator, which, as I told you last time, identifies basically the existence of an action that carries a certain intensity generated by accumulation of factors and emotions. I gave you an example. It can be, let's say, an amazing fourth quarter financial results, which are being published. This kind of momentum can show this, let's say, incline of the market to buy the stock. And yeah, just a short mention, a lot of companies have financial reports coming this week. So this indicator, for me at least, will be really fun to watch. Then I would suggest to just go down below, which context in which you can see the equilibrium indicator. And you can see that in this context is quite unstable for this specific company that we're analyzing here. This indicator will help us to observe how stable a company is from the public opinion point of view. So basically, we can deduct the history-based company activity, action, decision evolution. We can see the company's market state identified through the activity it basically carries out. And in this specific example for Microsoft, we can see that it's quite unstable. Then down below, you can see the political influence, which has a specific bar on the right-hand side. And this basically presents a company's degree of political implication within a selected time period. And we can see that in the specific example, it's around 75%. For me, it aids in observing certain situations, or for example, in keeping specific situations under observation, depending on the political situation. And of course, it always, this kind of indicator will always aid in calculating risk in an efficient way. And of course, in accordance with personal politics. So yeah, I think it's really relevant to just take a look over it to see the percentage. Again, everything that you see here is time-based. Then if we go down below, we can see the business indicators. This specific mini dashboard will help you better understand what kind of company Microsoft is from multiple perspectives. You can see that you can better understand the style of the company, you can better understand the type, the geographical behavior, and of course, the organization model. So going through them really quick, you can see on the left-hand side, the style indicator. This identifies the style in which the company carries out its activity. It can be classified as offensive, neutral, defensive. Of course, risks can be analyzed according to the current approach, or we can also analyze the existing threats. And of course, you can also analyze the sentiments surrounding the company's style. You can see that in this specific example, the style has a tendency to be quite defensive. Then we have the type indicator. This specific indicator presents the method through which the company operates based on its approach. And it can be classified as strategic, neutral, aggressive, maybe also chaotic, who knows? This basically represents the sentiment surrounding the type of approach, which of course can be for sure analyzed. Then we have the business behavior indicator. This specific indicator offers information about the business's behavior let's say the business has according to both the country and the culture it originates from, and of course the degree of globalization. For me, in my, let's say, day-to-day analysis, it helps me to observe the company's power to resolve expansion, to resolve, let's say, recession situations. It also helps me, for example, in observing its adaptability level to changing circumstances, which I think is really valuable. Then on the right-hand side, we have the organization model, which it's an indicator that offers information about the way in which a company carries out its activity from a product portfolio point of view, and of course, the way in which it handles deployment. For me, in my day-to-day work, it helps in observing the company's adaptability to market needs and changes. It also helps in observing the degree of how standard and how they usually operate towards the market. And you can see that in this specific example, the organization model is quite standard. Also, the business behavior is quite global, and the company type is oriented towards strategic. Nice, that was the business indicator mini dashboard. Then down below, you can see the marketing indicators mini dashboard. And long story short, it indicates how the company is performing from a marketing and awareness perspective. And this, of course, includes multiple indicators. First of all, you can see the marketing presence, which I have discussed about, but a long story short, the user can observe how visible the company is in the whole market. Then we have the general opinion, which I have also mentioned last time. It displays the general mood regarding a company over, again, a selected period of time, everything being extracted from online sources. It helps me in identifying people's opinion about the company in a really quantitative way. And in this, from this perspective, I can know whether maybe a process of buying a lot of shares can happen, or maybe a sell-off can happen. Then at the right side, we have the marketing core persons, marketing core company, and marketing core products. And this marketing core indicator, let's say, it's something that shows what the core is that sits at the base of the company's image and around what it's built. It helps me, for example, in observing what the element that gives the company's value is. We can see that in the specific example from the news analyzed in the time frame selected. You can see that there's an incline towards marketing the products of this specific company, and less the persons and the company as a whole. So yet again, it's really interesting to see the degree of awareness in terms of whether it's about the products, whether it's about the company, or just a core person, just the core people that are, let's say, involved in the company. Then on the right-hand side, we have the emotional indicators. This mini dashboard for me is probably one of the most spectacular components of Decision Point. It helps the users better understand how the company is perceived by its target market. And of course, I'll begin from left to right. The first one is the company motivation. This indicator offers information about the existence of market demand for a need that the company, of course, needs to address, or about the company needs which the company promises to address. So whether they promise to address or they are already addressing. It's a really interesting indicator. Again, I use it every day in my day-to-day analysis. Then at the right, we have the company trust indicator. And this indicator defines the level of trust the market has in the company. So you can see that in this specific case, it's quite a high percentage, is almost 100%. This can help, of course, to do the analysis of elements that influenced trust in the company. And yet again, a lot of good conclusions can be taken just by looking at the specific indicator. Then we have the company confidence. And this is an indicator that offers information about the trust a company has in its own forces, but also in the actions it undertakes or wishes to undertake. Again, I told you, this mini dashboard is just spectacular. For me, it helps me because I can do my analysis according to the company activity and the promises made. It helps me to do the analysis of the factors that maybe led to the confidence that is being reflected in the specific indicator. And yeah, last but not least, I can also, let's say, do an analysis and check the details source verification in terms of just to see where this, like what kind of elements have been there in the market so that the confidence is so high for this specific company. Then we have the reputation indicator. And this indicator defines the company image from the positive or negative sentiment point of view, depending on the effects its action generated. It helps in the day-to-day work just to do the analysis of the sentiments that influence the company's image. Also, we can do the analysis of the public opinion. We can do the analysis of the history and, let's say, the actions upon which this indicator again is based. So yeah, that was the company reputation. You can see that the percentage here is quite high as well. And then last but not least, you can see the company innovation indicator. And this is an indicator that offers data about the involvement level in methods or technologies that can increase efficiency in various sectors. We can see that in this specific example is around 50%, but it's really important because it would help me or anyone which uses decision points to observe whether the company creates elements of innovation as generating products or for internal optimization, which of course can be achieved. And personally, I've also used this indicator to do like a detailed analysis on all the innovative elements that were to observe in this specific company addressing their clients, of course. So again, we can see that about 50% on this specific one. Then we have the emotional charts, which is basically a graphical representation over the time frame regarding the emotions extracted earlier. And yeah, down below, we can see the risk indicators mini dashboard, which indicates, of course, how risky an investment in the company is. You can see the company risk, which we've already mentioned last time. And on the right side, we have the company conflict indicator. This indicator presents the existence of conflicts that have occurred or that can occur in the future. It helps me a lot, for example, when I do the analysis of the conflict source. It's really relevant and important. It also helps me to analyze the conflict as a, let's say, historical base factor in order to observe other factors, because as you know, a lot of things influence others. So it's really important to also take a look at this specific percentage. Then on the right-hand side, we have the social indicators dashboard. And this specific dashboard includes, we have on the left-hand side, we have the company status. This indicator shows how active a company is from a marketing perspective through its, let's say, directive actions. For me, for example, it helps when I want to identify the company's operating method and momentum. It helps in identifying who generates momentum and presence in terms of marketing. And yeah, it also helps me personally in observing how a company can overcome and maybe speculate certain moments and how it manages situations. So again, I think it's really relevant in the day-to-day analysis. Then we have the company power, which we have discussed last time. I'll skip to the company performance. And this indicator presents the index between promises and achievements. Again, from a public opinion point of view, everything based on the company's activity. And for me, it helped in, for example, identifying the evolution of a company from a qualitative point of view, which I think is spectacular. It also helped me in observing if a company's traction is actually generated by its activity. Then on the right-hand side, we have the company thrust. The thrust indicator is, let's say, an intensity vector that offers information about how strongly a company is propelled through its action, achievements, and promises. For me, it's useful because I can see whether some market actions actually generate sentiment in a positive way or in a negative way. And I can also do the analysis in terms of elements that fuel the traction generating engine, so to say. So yeah, again, through further analysis, I can take really good decisions and really good conclusions. Then the company value, I've mentioned it last time, whether the company is undervalued or overvalued or undervalued. In this specific context, we can see that Decision Point believes that it's quite overvalued. And then we have the company predictability, which it basically calculates the degree of how predictive are the situations and the actions that this specific company takes. And yeah, of course, it helped me in, let's say, observe how company behavior evolves throughout the, let's say, time frame and the whole year. And of course, I've also used it to analyze risk based on situations in which company can find itself. So again, I think it's really helpful. Then we have the prediction gap, which I've mentioned. There are many, many factors that contribute to the end price. And we can see that in this specific context, the prediction gap is quite low, which means that the prediction price, which is down below, can be a really good indicator of how the company can evolve. And you can see that the momentum is pointing towards, let's say, a better price. And you can see that Decision Point believes that the price at the end of tomorrow stock exchange, like the end price of Microsoft tomorrow evening, will be approximately $311, which I believe is higher than it is right now. So again, the momentum is going up. Then we can see the price charts, the business charts, which again is just plotting the points over a period of time. And last but not least, we can also see the graph, like the graphical representation of the momentum and equilibrium charts, which again, I think is relevant because you can see it on a day-by-day basis. So I'll stop sharing my screen. That was the advanced tab of Decision Points. And yeah, I guess my time for today is up. Unfortunately, I do not have time for a full example, but I will leave this one on the audience. Like, what decisions would you make based on the information shown today? How would you play Microsoft, keeping in mind what you've seen so far? Of course, this was an advanced mode of Decision Point. And yeah, I think a lot of really good conclusions can be taken just by looking at these specific indicators. And probably you have noticed I have skipped again the social circumplex. Well, we have the right person to discuss about this today. So I have the pleasure to introduce to you PhD Adela Fofiu.
Thank you very much, Andrei. Thank you for your very interesting and generous walk through Decision Point and the indicators that surround the social circumplex. I'm very happy to be here with you tonight, and very happy to have the chance to bring a different light on what happens in Decision Point through that colorful wheel that you have seen, the social circumplex. As a sociologist, I have to say before anything else that working in the IT industry and the artificial intelligence and machine learning environments is absolutely fascinating, because what we have to work with together as very different types of scientists is, as a common ground, the word, the discourse that we can find in all sorts of let's call them data repositories, from news to, back in my experience, literature of all sorts of genre, or correspondence, private correspondence, or historical archives. In this project in particular, what we work with, as Andrei already mentioned, is news and news discourse. And why did we want to build a social circumplex to address, to digest news? As Andrei very well said, we don't have anymore the time, the physical time in the morning over coffee or whenever we want to summarize what happens in media. We don't have the time, and more importantly, we don't have the cognitive capacity to do that anymore. The volumes that we communicate in the world are unprecedented. In terms of terabytes, I've read the comparison at some point. It might surpass the number of known stars that we know in astronomy, for instance, in every month of media publication. So that's absolutely, can you even conceive it with your mind? So if we don't have the cognitive capacity to digest the information, what about the affective, the emotional capacity to digest what happens out there? This is why, in lay terms, in common knowledge, there's sometimes this assessment that, wow, I feel confused, I feel frustrated, there's too much noise in the media, I don't know what to pick, I don't know what to listen to, whose advice is best in a televised conference, for instance, or whose advice is best in an opinion article in newspapers. That's a very hard question. All of those are actually very hard questions. And why are they hard? Originally, I formed myself as a sociologist, but then I specialized in social psychology. And what I learned in social psychology is that emotion is our most constant, or the only constant, contact that we have with the world. Rationalization and thinking about the world and perception and understanding what perception is a secondary process. How we first react to the world is emotion. Well, interestingly, especially in the West, we're not necessarily taught in school. If we're taught in our families, that's very lucky. We're not necessarily taught to decipher, to detect and to understand and to decipher what we actually feel ourselves about the world. And sometimes that means we're also challenged to understand what the world communicates to us in emotions. So in this industry of data analysis, data collection, data processing, data analysis, and then decision making at some point, I have seen throughout my career that the emotional component, very basic in our day-to-day experiences, is not actually factored in. So we said at Prisma Analytics and Crypto Data that, wow, this is a very, very interesting market opportunity and even academic opportunity. So what we did with the Circumplex, given its name, circular, is that we challenged the standard in the industry, which was sentiment analysis for over 20 years. We decided to challenge it and approach emotions in a more complex way, just the way as us humans are actually built. So what was our critique towards sentiment analysis? Well, sentiment analysis is linear. You have a horizontal or vertical bar, whatever, it's two-dimensional, with only 2 or 3 points on it: negative, neutral, positive sentiment. Well, if you think about yourselves, your own subjective experiences in the world, that's not how you assess what you feel about something or about someone. You have more detailed, more nuanced emotions about the circumstances that you find yourself in. So this is why we said, okay, let's take this piece of knowledge from social psychology and add a third dimension to that line of sentiment analysis. And this is how the Circumplex is actually born, because we put another axis on top of the horizontal sentiment analysis original, and we transformed it into a Cartesian model in which we actually measure emotions in 2 ways, not just a positive, neutral, negative, or the other way around. Is only the balance of our emotions, how good or how bad we feel, or how good or how bad information, emotional information is in a text. What the Circumplex does is that on top of balance, good or bad, and the nuances that we encoded in the application on this axis, we also added intensity or arousal, we called it. how intense is that good or bad feeling. So we are able to measure also the intensity of an emotion, because it's one thing to like something, and it's a very different thing to love something or even to adore something. Not to mention that it's one thing to hate something or to dislike. So as opposite to sentiment analysis, the standard in fintech for so many years, what we do with Prism Analytics and crypto data is that we are able to detect, measure, and then visualize in a more granular, more refined way the emotional content of news. Now, going back to the question of why we want to do that, it's not only the fact that other available models are too simple. It's also the opportunity to actually use this type of information, effective information, and add it to all the other factual data that news and other types of reports that Decision Point can include at some point actually offer. So it's not just facts that we work with, we also work with emotions. So take, for instance, there was this very, I don't know what the word would be, challenging or amusing statement several years back during the elections in the US when Trump won. At some point, one of the spokespersons back there in the States said that there are alternative truths. So that's an emotional statement that actually created a lot of noise in mass media. Again, it was an effective reaction from the journalists and everyone on the receiving end of that statement. What's with the alternative truth? If truth is a factual information that you can check, the only things that make it alternative or create several varieties of truth is actually emotional framing. So how you speak about the things that are interesting to you. This is why the Circumplex is a very powerful tool in understanding discourse and how we talk about the world. How we connect it after all this long talk in social psychology and how we perceive information, all types of information, factual, emotional, affective, so on and so forth. How does this connect with the application? Well, the beauty of the Circumplex is that it employs machine learning techniques, and in a way, it bridges the world of knowledge development with artificial intelligence and data processing. How did we do that? You saw when Andrei presented the dashboard of Decision Point that the Circumplex had 8 layers, just like pizza slices in different colors. Well, these layers, each of them contains an emotional label, and underneath them, depending on the subscription that you choose in Decision Point, there are more granular, more nuanced emotions stemming like a tree from that main initial emotional label. What that means in information terms is that we use knowledge ontologies to organize the way emotions are communicated in media. That's important because knowledge ontologies so far work with types of concepts that are more related to factual data or to scientific data, scientific information, and not so much with the fuzzy, always shifting nature of emotions. And why do I make this statement? Because we're not, how aware, let me phrase it as a question, how aware are you or am I when my emotional state changes? We're not that aware. It's actually a flux. We flow from one state to another. And in discourse, in written text, it happens just the same. It's not a very clear flip from one paragraph to another that the emotional dimension has changed. And the beautiful challenge that we said yes to was to, okay, let's try and address these paragraphs with a knowledge ontology of emotions. Get those emotion trees and emotional organizations from social psychology textbooks that lie in libraries, and put them to work and combine them then with factual information about the companies that Decision Point addresses today. Thank you. I think this is how I reached the end of my argument to bring more color to the colorful indicators. One more comment, actually. So the Circumplex, that colorful wheel, and the indicators are related in the sense that the Circumplex exploits, so as I said, detects, measures, and then visualizes effective emotional information in news. But then all the indicators around it are actually a way of detecting the circumstance. What are the circumstances of the emotions that the Circumplex detects about the company? So we build a very colorful and detailed portrait of each company in Decision Point with emotions in the center, and then indicators in the categories Andrei presented around them. Thank you so much.
Dr. Fofiu, thanks so much. Adela, as you guys probably know, is a very prolific speaker and fantastic color person. If you want an explanation about something relating to IT, particularly in her area of expertise, there's nobody better. Adela, thanks so much. Folks, we're going to move into our Q&A section now. And as I understand it, we've got a few people in the Zoom call with us now. A recurring name and regular visitor with us is Mr. Obina. Mr. Obina, I understand you're with us again this Thursday. Thanks for joining us again. Please go ahead and unmute yourself and confirm that we've got a connection. Something relating to IT, particularly in her area of expertise, there's nobody. Are you there, Mr. Urbina? I think we might have an audio problem with him. We also have Ms. Zaren Aktuna. Zaren, are you with us this evening? Mr. Urbina, I'll come back to you.
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead and unmute yourself and confirm that we've got a connection.
Yes.
Something relating to IT, particularly in her area. There's nobody. All right. Zaren, good to have you with us. Good evening.
Good evening.
Go ahead. You've got the floor with Dr. Fofiu. We also have Ms. Zaren Aktuna. Zaren, are you with us this evening? Mr. Urbina, I'll come back to you.
Yes, I am.
Please go ahead and unmute yourself and confirm that we've got a connection.
Yes.
Zaren, go ahead.
Yes. Here's my question. This tool seems greatly applicable to many areas, such as the company analysis, branding, reputational evolution, market research, and real-life projects that was mentioned in the last webinar with different counterparties. And so how do you envision this tool to be used going forward?
I will attempt to answer this question. You're very right, Zaren. The tool, this application can be used in many ways. And it serves, your question serves me in making a point that somehow I missed in my initial intervention. That is that, very importantly, mood matters. The more the application will be used as time goes by, the more we will become able to see that there are arcs, I like to call them, like trends of how people feel collectively about issues in the world. These moods have a longer lifespan than media attention, for instance, to an issue, media attention to a novelty in a company, media attention to a decision made within a company, or media attention towards how a company is involved in politics, in public politics. These are more or less instantaneous events that happen in our social life. And what this application can do over time the more you expand the time span in the query, is that it can show larger mood trends, which actually determine our larger events. When I say larger, I mean social historical events. Just think, this will be a bit far-fetched, but let's say for the sake of the argument that it works. After World War II, the predominant mood, especially in the West, was very enlightened, very, I might say even relaxed. The conflict was over, and now it was time for reconstruction. And in about 10, 15 years, this gave way to a very prolific science fiction literature that was very optimistic. It gave way to rock and roll music. It gave way to shorter length skirts for girls and women. And eventually, several years later, it even gave way to the hippie movement, very peaceful, optimistic, and, you know, let's hold hands and save the world. And from that, the collective moods fell back to boredom is one of the words that describe the 80s and the political crisis of the 80s, and so on and so forth. So what we do as larger communities and societies is that we move like the sea. We have waves of emotions. We have waves of mood that actually determine on a grander scale what happens. And the application can move on this granularity from events, from one day to the other, as Andrei illustrated with the price, all the way to shifts in mood across time.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Zarin. Thanks so much. Mr. Urbina, I see you're back. You can go ahead and unmute, but please, if you're in the Zoom call, either mute your YouTube audio or disconnect from the YouTube stream so that we don't get the feedback. Good evening.
All right, good evening. It's my pleasure being in the meeting, and I would like to ask a question. Just as this social circumference is like a driving force for the decision point technology, now I would like to know where does the social circumference gather the initial data by which it can use to make the decisions on a larger scale? The intelligence that will drive the social circumference, where does it come from? How does the technology derive that intelligence? Like the last time we discussed that the forex market, the trading, and some other industries can better utilize the decision points. Now, this social circumference, what role will it play in the decision points?
Andre or Adela, did either of you grasp that?
I said, what role, what function will the social circumference play in the decision points technology? Okay.
Adela, Andre, which of you want to field that?
If I understand correctly, what role does the social circumplex play in decision point?
Yes. Of course.
Okay, so it's the central role. It's the main feature of the application because it exploits the main aspect in news that we are interested in decision point, which is emotion and the value of emotion in discourse. And then it feeds the indicators that Andrei described. So these indicators bring also other types of measurements on the text that we use, and those measurements are combined.
Okay, that's very interesting.
Mathematical formula. Sorry.
All right, that's interesting. Like you made mention of emotions. Now, would the social circumference have to be present in people or places for it to be able to dictate emotions?
Okay, Mr. Urbina, we're getting a really chopped up feed, and we're going to need to move on to the next question. Okay, so we don't drag through the end of the session. Listen, thank you again so much for participating. We hope to see you again in another webinar, Mr. Urbina. Thank you so much. We also have in the room,
Okay.
I'm told, Salah Mukles. Salah, are you in? Are you here in the call with
Hello,
us?
yeah, I'm in. I'm in.
Ah,
Hello. Good evening.
wonderful, sir. Mhm. I understand you've got a question for us
How are you
today.
doing today?
Very well, sir. Thank you. Good
I
to have you
have
here.
actually, thank you. It's also nice to be here again. And I have this evening 3 questions, please. The first one is, why is the social circumference important in decision making and how it will be useful to the users? The second one is, so there is how analyzing the social energy fields or these bubbles will help me make a decision about a certain research. And the third question actually is in 2 questions, divided 2 questions. The first one is, how is the data gathered from this social circumference will help will be any different than the data gathered from search engines, and what makes this social circumference unique? Thank you very much. That's the questions.
Della, are you prepared to field those?
Okay, let's try. And Andrei, please jump if you see I think. Okay, so why is social circumplex important? I think was the first question in how it will be useful to users. I will repeat one idea I had in the initial intervention. We think it's important because it, let me be brave and say it, revolutionizes the way fintech and other types of customers can actually address this this initial version of sentiment analysis. So we bring an innovative approach to how emotions are detected and used as metrics, as measurements in all sorts of industries, especially in business to business and business to customer, as Andrei said. That's powerful because it's not a linear model, it's a circular model. It's very precise through its mathematics and language, natural language processing techniques. And I will use this to use your, to answer to your last question about how does the social circumplex compare to a search engine. Well, in a search engine, it's very different than a search engine because in a search engine, it's you, the user, who makes the query, and the results that you obtain are tailored around the phrase, the expression, the word, the term that you input in the search field. Well, the social circumplex uses machine learning to understand, if I may, to understand the discourse, to understand what journalists and media outlets actually write about the companies that we are interested in. So the query that you as a user make is on the company. You can choose what company you want to observe in decision point, but how the circumplex extracts emotional information about that company is completely machine learning, and hopefully in the near future, artificial intelligence. So it will have a life of its own in the way it understands the paragraphs.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Salah, thanks again.
Yeah. Okay,
Go
thank
ahead.
you. No, thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Salah, for joining us again. Good to have you back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andre, I've got a question here for you from a Lucas Albertson. Mr. Albertson's question to you, Andre, is can you foresee crimes with the Q search and perhaps prevent them? If so, are you planning something like this?
That's a really interesting question, to be honest. So the member of the audience wants to see whether we're able to predict them. Did I get that right?
Yes, yeah, that's the question. I believe that's the inference.
Okay. We do not go with that kind of promise, that's for sure. He mentioned Q search, which is nice. I'm happy that he actually did his research in terms of our suite of applications. To be honest, we have thought about this. There are a couple of competitors which do similar stuff to this. Of course, Q-Search right now can help you, let's say, better understand some political and geographical issues that are currently happening, like in the world. But you know, predicting crimes, I think it still involves like a thought process on your own. Q-Search at the moment is able to, again, display information, to find connections in places you wouldn't thought about. And based on what Q-Search displays, I think we as users can take those kind of decisions in terms of crimes and maybe natural elements that may happen throughout the world, or maybe, I don't know, political conflicts and so on. So I think the conclusion is on our side, Q-Search in specific, I think is a great tool for us to see those kind of connections. But again, I think the end decision in terms of, hey, this is going to happen, I think it's up to us. So yeah, Adela, please, if you have any follow-up on this.
This is a very important distinction indeed. These applications, the decision point or Q-Search or the Circumplex itself, they do not come to a conclusion that can be understood as a decision. The decision in the end pertains to the user that we serve with palatable information, let's say, from all the noise that we swim in every day in our daily lives and professional lives and political lives. These applications actually transform the noise into useful, relevant information, and then it's up to you as a user to make a decision based on that. It can be for your personal life or for your professional life or your business life, but it's up to you. That's very important. And in the end, you know, just to pinch a little bit on the ethical issue, technology in itself can be seen as neutral. It's how you use it that determines its ethical value. So hopefully you'll all make good decisions using Decision Point and Circumplex.
And Q-Search.
And Q-Search, yes.
Good question. Good question, by the way. And, you know, I think it's worth noting that, you know, not Decision Point, but rather C+A technology, the underlying technology that powers all of the data analysis through the Knowledge Vault, is a technology that will continue to evolve over time. And I think there are going to be all kinds of interesting things arise from the evolution of C+8 and the evolution of the knowledge that we're processing regularly, particularly as people come to interact with it. I think there are a lot of insights that we will glean that we don't really understand or even think about at this point in time. So stay posted, I would say, because I think there are a lot of interesting things to come in the future. We'll move to the next question because we're nearing the end of the hour here, guys. Andre, there's a question here for you from a Tino Talheim. Tino asks, and this is a YouTube viewer from today's webinar. Tino asks, how in detail can I formulate my query for Decision Point? Question number one. Question two is, can I just type in a keyword or a question like I do with a quote normal search engine like Google?
Right. We have a lot of applications on the pipeline. I'm sure there's a lot of, let's say, kind of confusion in the community. So I think it's a great question because I think we can answer this once and for all. So in the context of Decision Point, you can search for a specific company or an index. That's it. You cannot just simply free write anything that comes to your mind. So you're able to select a specific company listed on the stock exchange, or you can also check for a specific index. You remember I gave you the example of SPY last week. After you manage to select the company in which you're interested, then you can filter all the information starting from the time frame, let's say. So from which point in time until which point in time do you want information for that specific company? So that is how decision point works. Pick a company, pick a time frame, and then interpret the results. That's one. What you've mentioned is how Q-Search operates. So in Q-Search, initially, like the initial version, you're able to search for any of the specific 7 segments, as in people, location, actions, and so on, which are were specific filters which you were able to just write keywords. We are planning for this new version of Q-Search to do this free text, let's say, search exactly as you do on Google. So I'm sure we'll have a webinar on that in the near future, in which we will present the product. But yeah, until that point, again, Q-Search was made so that you can use the specific 7 filters to enter keywords. And in the future, we are thinking about users entering a phrase, and then based on the phrase, we give you the results and, of course, the information mapping. So I think that answers your question, yeah.
Okay, we've got a couple of other questions here, maybe 1 or 2 that I can answer to kind of move through. As you know, our attempt is always to answer all of the questions that are presented to us during the webinar. We haven't been able to do that yet, but we're trying. We have a question from Andre Nicolai Fagoros. His question is, as an investor, can I use the decision point tool before March the 30th? And I think it's safe to say the answer to that is no, unfortunately. You know, we have a roadmap, and you know, none of the applications will be released prior to the launch dates. I'll move to the next question. This is from Peter Hammerschmidt. Mr. Hammerschmidt has asked, hello, everyone. Is there, if I, as a company, would like to have information about another company, can you already say how high the costs will be for a query? Are the costs paid in Eden tokens?
Right. So what I can say about this question is that the overall payment will be accessible. That's the information I can give you at the moment. Each query will indeed cost something. We have a whole business plan around it in terms of how you can use the tokens. There are multiple options which you can pick, again, from a usage perspective, but anything in terms of overall costs, the promise that I can give you right now is that the price will be accessible for anyone.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, Mr. Hammerschmidt, the cost for a basic general query would be quite low, and what Andre is referring to is, you know, accessible to everyone would be construed to be very, very inexpensive for almost anybody accessing the Knowledge Vault. We've got a couple minutes left. We have a question from our good friend, Mr. Eater Pina. Good evening, Eater. Nice to see you again. And Eater's question tonight is, will Eden have access to publicity information, or will it have rights for more data? Will it be able to get information from audios and video?
Interesting question. So at the moment, Decision Point, and actually the overall C+A technology is able to access both open and closed sources of data. To answer the first question. To answer the second part of the question, can you repeat it, please, Chris?
Second part of the question is, will
audio
I be
and video?
able to? Yeah, audio and video, yeah.
Yeah, audio and video. We are planning to implement those in the future. At the moment, the C+A technology only integrates information in written form, but the overall timeline of Eden and Prisma Analytics also involves adding audio and video somewhere in the future.
And I believe we have one more question from, from Alicia. I see, from Alicia Roberts. Alicia's question is, what generally goes into calculation of these indicators? Mr. Sinescu.
Right. So in terms of the overall calculations, there are multiple elements. First of all, we have the news, which again are being aggregated and being analyzed overall, which of course is a main part of how decision point works. But apart from that, we also take relevant information from the stock market in terms of technical analysis and in terms of fundamental analysis. So we also gain this information because, again, decision point is primarily, let's say, sentiment analysis oriented platform, but it also integrates information in terms of, again, numbers from the fundamental analysis of the company, and also elements such as volume indicators, which you can see in the technical analysis parts of analyzing the overall company. So yeah, decision point and C+A technology overall integrates different kind of information, but at the end of the day, it's about news and numbers.
Okay, folks, we're at the top of the hour and the end of our session this week as a result. I'd like to thank everybody again for joining us. One last reminder, this is really all about community for us. Community, as we've developed and continue to grow, continues to reach out to us and ask for more information, and particularly in live settings like this. So Mr. Andre Sinescu, thanks so much again for being here with us tonight. Dr. Delafofiu, as well, thanks for joining and all of the wonderful contributions from you both. I would be remiss without mentioning the team again in the background, because folks, really, this does require quite a lot of effort to put these on. Despite the fact, we have these IT glitches as we do from time to time. These things are generally out of our control. But, Emma, Sarah, Cosmin, Carmen, Thomas, all of you guys in the background do a great job to put this on for everybody and keep Eden connected with the community. And we're very thankful to you all. So folks, again, we will be on again next week, next Thursday night, same time, same place. Until then, I bid you all a farewell and a good night to you all.
Recording